Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, tomorrow morning, depending on where you are. My name is Tom Marshall. I'm the editor of RECOIL Off-Grid magazine, and we are here to talk about a topic that is gaining more and more momentum on social media. It's garnered some mainstream media traction. You guys have seen all kinds of news articles and Netflix specials and infographics floating around the internet, and that's the subject of human trafficking. Anybody out there who's picked up a copy of our last issue of Off-Grid, issue number 39, you know that we cover this topic in several full-length feature articles, or you might have seen them on our website as well. We got such a strong reaction from you guys, from our audience, that we decided that we would do another live stream webinar like we've done in the past, and bring in some of the experts that we cited for some of those feature articles. So I'm going to start by going sort of around the quote-unquote room, as it were, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what their background is. So Bruce, if I could start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. It's a privilege to meet the other speakers. I started this journey. I was a professional, after the military, I was a professional adventurer and outdoorsman for about 20 years. And in my travels, started to hear and see things that were pretty disturbing. And then in the early 90s, I was in the ex-Soviet Union and was made aware of human trafficking at that time. And didn't really know what to do with it. Spent a lot of years trying to figure it out. Went back over in 2003 and went underground in Eastern Europe, and just saw horrible, horrible things. And it took me some years to figure out what to do. And then in 2009, we actually went into a pretty dangerous nation. Found out about all these brick kilns and factories that had enslaved kids, and we started rescuing. We just went in and just took them out, and over the years we've rescued just about 2,300 children and adults from sex trafficking and labor slavery, and still on a big learning curve. We're working in multiple countries and starting to do some work here in the States, but you know, with this COVID thing, we as everybody, we've been stalled out a little bit and getting ready to send some teams back out. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Bazzel, you want to chime in here, please?
Sure, thank you. Bazzel Baz, Citadel graduate, former captain, United States Marine Corps, former CIA, Special Operations Ground Branch. I am now the founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children, which is a 501c3 nonprofit of former intelligence, military, and law enforcement officers that are dedicated to the recovery of missing and exploited American children. We are probably one of the oldest NGOs in the United States for child rescue. We started in 1993, initially after the rescue of a couple of foreign children in Mogadishu, Somalia, prior to the Black Hawk Down incident. And when I got back to the United States, it was tugging on my heart. Started inquiring in 93 about missing children. We had about 250,000 in the US missing at that time, but my conversations with local, state, and federal law enforcement yielded the fact that these were considered just runaways. And the word trafficking at that time really wasn't a term that was being used, and there wasn't really a priority. I had been told directly at that time that homicides, terrorism, and those things were a priority. And in addition to that, that what law enforcement was up against were budgetary constraints, communication problems, anything and everything for them to be able to interact across state lines to go after missing and exploited children. Created the Association for the Recovery of Children in 93, and since that time, that's what we do. We handle pretty much our own backyard. After many years of being overseas, I've come to realize that the trafficking issue with children in the United States is far more sophisticated than probably any other place around the globe. And so we dedicated ourselves to handling our own backyard. And that's kind of my story.
Great, thank you so much. Teresa?
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Teresa Flores. I'm actually a survivor of human trafficking from when I was 15 years old in the United States. I have a license in social work and a master's in counseling education. Have written and published 5 books on the issue of human trafficking, several which are bestsellers. And I, about 10 years ago, founded the SOAP Project, which stands for Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution, where we gather up volunteers all across the country to help us distribute labeled bars of soap and items with the national hotline on it. And we take those and give them out to hotels and motels, along with missing children's posters, mostly during big sporting events like the Super Bowl and Final Four, but just even on an ongoing basis. So we have 19 chapters across the country, and we do that. We work with local organizations, NGOs, and law enforcement when we go and do that. And then we also do a lot of survivor care, retreats for survivors from 18 years of age to 71. We have case management and free counseling for survivors as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yousef?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. My name is Yousef Badou. I am the least cool person on this panel, so we'll start from there. My background was in the United States Marine Corps, where I landed in a really cool program called Combat Hunter, where we taught deploying service members how to basically scan a crowd and look for the non-overt threats. Everybody can see the gun and the bomb and whatnot, but what about that subtle layer of nonverbal communication happening around us that can keep our troops safe? Did that for a lot of years and broke off a few years back and started my own organization. I train those specific pre-event indicators of fear or threat or discomfort. So on my side of the house, where I'd come in as maybe a hotel or a high-end organization, I go in and train their frontline staff. And hey, if you see A, B, and C, a decision needs to be made. You know, enforcement need to be, law enforcement needs to be called. So that's where I kind of fit in on this side.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. Before we dive into some of the questions, I do want to let you folks in the audience know that we are going to be setting some time aside at the end to do some audience Q&A. So if you guys look down, if you're in Zoom, there should be a Q&A or a raise your hand or a chat function down at the bottom of the window. If you guys want to go ahead and start sending in any questions that you may have, we're going to try and pick some of those up, as many of them as we can. We're going to pick those up at the end. So please just feel free to keep those streaming in. And my coworkers on the back end will be, we will actually have human beings reading every single question. And like I said, we're gonna get to as many of those as we can. But before we get to all that, first, what I'd like to do, especially considering the various backgrounds that are here, I'd actually like to take a minute and define human trafficking. I think when a topic like this gets a large and sudden burst of media attention, like I think this topic has in the last couple months, I think that there's a lot of misinformation and just general misperception that goes on about that. So Teresa, I'd like to start with you, and just tell me what your definition or operating principle or concept is for what qualifies as human trafficking.
Right. So anybody that's over the age of 18, if they have been involved in commercial sex, and they have somebody forcing them into that, benefiting off of that, then that is human trafficking. We deal specifically with minors, though the survivors that we work with are all generally over 16. So if you are under the age of 18, involved in any form of commercial sex, then that's automatically human trafficking. I was just looking through Google today, all these different cases that are coming up of people that are being charged with child prostitution. And there's no such thing. A child prostitute does not exist. Somebody is buying them and having sex with them, which is a molester. But those are actually human trafficking victims. So I hope that explained it from my point of view.
It did. Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, I guess the definition that I look at is the lack of free will, people that are not able to make their own decisions. I deal with a lot of labor slavery also. So I see people that are captive. They're not able to live the lives that they want to. They are exploited and used. Many are treated like animals and less than human. And so, I think Teresa's definition is the baseline for that. And just to go a little deeper, is just the lack of free will, the lack of being able to live life the way they desire, having other people make the decisions for them, and using them in every way imaginable.
Bazzel, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I've noticed that as we've continued to make more and more people, quote unquote, aware of the human trafficking issue, that even when we speak about human trafficking now, particularly, and I'm going to stay in my lane here, even though we have and continue to rescue adults, we primarily go after children. Actually, Teresa Flores and I've had this conversation before. Now when I even talk about human trafficking, a lot of people don't even blink an eye. So what I'd like to say, and not sugarcoat it, is here's what it really is from our perspective. It is paid child rape. That's it. It's just paid child rape. People pay you money so that you can bring them a child and rape them over and over and over and over and over again. And in that process, it includes drugs, it includes torture, it includes things that I, as a former CIA interrogator, would not have done to some of my worst enemies.
Yousef.
Well, everybody said it, exactly right, and much better than I could articulate. Being a newcomer, semi-newcomer, what really opened my eyes is the distinction between human smuggling and human trafficking. Not having the background in it, people say human smuggling, I would do the same thing where I'd lump those two together. And now I understand human smuggling is a transportation crime. You might be dealing, sometimes unwilling, but mostly willing participants moving from A to B. Whereas, like everyone's saying, this is man-made modern day slavery. There's no other way to cut it. But for an outsider, not understanding that distinction was a big eye opener for me.
Great, thank you guys so much. So like I said a minute ago, I do have some scripted questions, although we just had one come in from the audience that I think is a great way to kickstart this conversation. The question was to anybody on the panel, why do you think this problem is getting so much attention right now? Has the activity increased so much that it has naturally come to the surface, or have there been events that have taken place which have made this a priority among law enforcement, politicians, mainstream media, etc.? Open question. Chime in as soon as you got something.
You know what, Tom? No, go ahead, Teresa. I saw you. Please go ahead.
This has been, sexual slavery has been around since biblical times. It's nothing new, but I think with the internet, cell phones, technology, things like that, it has just skyrocketed. I mean, I wasn't the only one in 1980 that was being trafficked, but now because of computers and cell phones and things, it's definitely gone off the charts. But I mean, we've all on this panel have worked our butts off, to bring awareness to this issue. So we've been screaming from the mountaintop to people that this is an issue, talking to legislation, talking to law enforcement, that we need to do a better job of this, because we've got a lot of missing kids and a lot of homeless kids. And those are the kids that are really at risk for this. A 17-year-old being forced by people to work in a strip club, she's being trafficked. So we're just doing, I think, a really good job at bringing this to light, finally. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I think whether you approve or disapprove of the current administration in Washington, I will have to give them credit in that the President Trump and that administration and Vice President Pence have been some of the very few and the first, as in the presidency, that have chosen to tackle this problem unashamedly. And along with their alliance with DOJ, Attorney General Barr as well, Katie Sullivan, and a number of other people, we're bringing this to the forefront. But even with that said, let me just leave you with this. Even though more people are becoming aware, there are just as many people that are turning a blind eye to it, because we have such an over-sexualized society that there are literally millions, and I mean this because we've taken the polls, there are millions of people out there that believe there is nothing wrong with treating human beings on a sexual platform as is being done to them. And so we not only fight the battle of the perpetrators, but we also go up against other people that won't do anything about it because they believe it's okay to have sex with a child. You know, there are organizations, and I'll say this openly because I've had those conversations with the LGBT, who believe that the consent should be dropped down to age 12, and that pedophiles should now be a gender issue, and that it's okay for pedophiles to actually have sex with children. So we're living in a very warped time here, and you can see that we're almost like Fort Apache. For everybody that's on this panel and everybody that's involved in anti-trafficking, we're totally surrounded by the bad guys.
Yeah, if I could add to that also, I think to the original question, one of the triggers was probably the Epstein matter. That came to light, it made people aware. And as we've seen over the last 4 or 5 months, you know, it's just been on social media everywhere. And so I think that was one of the triggers that caused people to start looking into it. And then as more and more social media got out there, you know, more and more people just wanted to be involved and passing the information out. And you know, Baz, you're one of the pioneers of this. And back then there was nobody talking about it, you know, back in those days. And now it's every day you pull up social media, there's things about human trafficking. So, you know, huge strides have been made, and this is a good season to hopefully make some bigger impact.
From a veteran perspective, I think everything that it's kind of the snowball effect, the flywheel effect of the Epstein events and being out there. But from a veteran perspective, and we've all talked to our friends and family have been there, you find out about what's really happening behind the scenes. Like Baz said, we're surrounded. And as a veteran who's done deployments, it's like you served your country to go protect, you know, your family and your country from that kind of evil, and to come home and to know that for a fact, not only is it happening, but it's rampant and it's all over the place. I think a lot of those same emotions that cause people to join the military and serve the country start getting riled up because it's such an insidious evil. So I think that's part of the passion. A lot of people like my age are waking up going, whoa, this, you know, I thought we kept that, you know, off our shores.
Yeah. And Tom, if I may, not to run an extra mile here, but I think for the audience to understand how and I think I can safely say this for everybody on the panel, and I know you'll agree with me after I mention this, but the fact that people are being made aware of this doesn't change the fact, doesn't do a whole lot. Remember back in the days when we had missing children and we had their picture on a milk carton? What happened was people would see the milk carton, the picture, and they would think they were doing something about the issue because they saw the picture on the milk carton. But at the end of the day, that milk carton went into the garbage. Well, one of the things we have to be careful about in this escalation of awareness, if we could say, is that people need to understand that a child doesn't come home unless there's boots on the ground. And so unless you're ready to get equipped to do something about it, and when we say equipped, that means study the whole AO, the whole area of operation, and understand what your capabilities are so that you can actually pull someone off the street. You can actually save a child or a person that's being prostituted. Then all you are is a person that's aware. And that's no different than people that pray for a situation. It's like as if you should water a tree and it grows leaves, but it never produces any fruit. And what we need are people that produce fruit and are willing to say, this isn't going to happen on my watch. So what can I do to actually go in the field and do something about this issue?
Thank you guys so much. A couple of you raised social media as part of your answer to that question. So I'm going to take that and I'd like to springboard into into one of my questions, which is how has the evolution of social media and smart technology and the proliferation of the internet culture, how has that impacted not just the trafficking trade from their perspective, but also how has it been able to influence you guys, positive or negative, for intervention, interdiction, and rescue? And I'm actually going to have Bruce start off with that one, please.
Yeah, boy, there's negatives and positives. Obviously, for many years we flew under the radar and didn't want anybody to really know what we were doing. But you get to a point where you have to raise funds, and social media has been a great platform for raising the funds so that we can put boots on the ground. For us, it's been a way to get the word out, to educate people. We do a lot of training of our own team members. So through social media platforms, we've been able to, get people to apply for those trainings, and we've really been able to build a great organization, in part due to social media. The bad part is the more that you're known, the less you can do the work that I like to do. So there's a lot of negatives and a lot of positives to all of it. I saw Baz smiling because I'm sure he's deals with that all the time.
Oh, go ahead, Baz, take it away.
No, Bruce, you're right on target. It's like a two-edged sword. We have social media, obviously, that has helped us. And we were very much like you. We flew under the radar, and we just never wanted anybody to know what we were doing except for DOJ or whatever. And then people would, because you were so under the radar, they were like, well, what are you guys actually doing? And we're not going to contribute to an organization doesn't have a little bit more exposure. So we're right up there with you. I think social media has also allowed us to have a window to the perpetrators to some degree, because as we all know, we can use it one way, and of course they're using it as well. And so it's benefited us greatly when we run operations through social media or whatever it may be. And then at the same time, depending on the big companies that are running social media, Facebook, Google, whatever it may be, sometimes I actually wonder why they allow some of the perpetrators even on their places. Right now across the board, and it's not so subtle, we pick up on things on social media, and it's like, how is that company not being arrested for what they're doing? I don't get that. So, Teresa can probably speak to that. She knows that arena pretty well. So.
Yeah, social media is probably the number one way that youth are being trafficked. They are being sought after. Maybe a kid that doesn't have a lot of friends on there is posting things like, talking a lot and wanting friends, lonely, not a lot of attention and everything. And these guys are just so good at finding them. They just have this radar that they can, pinpoint a kid that is just desperate to have somebody to talk to. So social media, gaming, where they can talk back and forth to people that they think is, Jenny, who's 14, a couple of states away, but really is Robert, who's 41 years old. And so social media is as great as it can be for our organizations. Definitely has been the detriment to human trafficking of youth.
Yousef, I'd kind of like to hear you chime in specifically on this. Knowing what your background is, I'd imagine there's pros and cons. One, with social media, you lose that human element of body language and micro expressions and things like that. On the other hand, I know from my own previous lifetimes that it can be a really valuable tool for like network mapping. So, what are your thoughts on that in this context?
So in my bubble, information works both ways. So definitely, are they contacting kids and they're bringing it into their funnels? Absolutely. But I'm sure everybody knows with all that's all their metadata too. So that's a data point. That's something I do like about it, is that that's a big digital breadcrumb that's pretty hard to spread out over links. So that's a con there, but not to change subjects, but when everyone would hear about in the news about some an ISIS bride that would fly from Norway or Canada, and you go, oh my God, what are you talking? This blue-haired, blonde-eyed woman flying to be an ISIS bride. Well, they're recruiting right off Twitter. Okay, and when they recruit them off Twitter to join a foreign combatant, no one starts talking about bombing and blowing stuff up and against terrorism. It's none of that. They give you little stories with a little grain of truth, and it's over a period of time, and they nudge you, and then they start to kind of build scaffolding around you. They start alienating your friends and family, and then all of a sudden they get you to the point where they buy a ticket to Syria. You know, I see this same thing happening. It's a huge, big social media funnel, and all they got to do is throw numbers at it. Enough people are going to click those posts and go down their horrible funnels, just like it did when it came to ISIS. So seeing that stuff and going, oh, I don't know how that could happen. Well, it's been happening since it began.
Great. Thank you guys so much. So we've had some good discussion about the trade itself, and how the conditions can be set for that. I'd like to switch gears just a little bit and talk about kind of the good side of this, in terms of the work that you guys are doing. I said it to you guys before we started, and I'll say it again for the sake of the audience. Understand that just about everybody on here is directly involved with a counter-trafficking or trafficking interdiction organization. And a lot of the work they do is hand in hand with state, federal, and local law enforcement. And a lot of those operations involve investigations that are currently ongoing. So what they can comment on about their own operations is going to be somewhat limited. But within that scope, Bazzel, I'll start with you. If you guys could talk a little bit about maybe the overall dynamic of how you guys go about, rescuing some of these children and adults when it applies. But I mean, what is the basic structure of kind of your rescue mission look like?
Sure, thanks, Tom. When all local, state, and federal law enforcement efforts have been exhausted, we generally get involved. We won't get involved in an ongoing operation or investigation unless we're specifically asked to do so by law enforcement. A lot of times we'll run operations and rescue kids, and we'll give that credit to law enforcement. That helps us, as Bruce knows, stay under the radar a little bit more as best we can. We have three initiatives. We have a legislative initiative that we handle at the White House to get the law changed, to be honest with you. I don't mind boldly saying it on this line. We're pushing that anybody who sexually exploits a child gets the death penalty. That's it. We have learned, I have interviewed many, many pedophiles, many people in prisons, and I've asked them, what's the one thing that would have deterred you from raping, killing, molesting that child, trafficking that child? Every single one, 100% has responded with, if I thought I was going to get the death sentence, I probably wouldn't have done it. So that's the first thing. Our second one is a training initiative. We've learned that a lot of people are aware. So now we're running a 5-day course that is all about equipping people, NGOs, teaching them how to actually run operations, to create an NGO and go from point A to point B. But what do you do between those 2 points when it goes upside down? So as much without crossing the line into classified tradecraft, we actually teach people to actually go locate and bring a child home. And then of course, the third initiative is our own operations. And what we do is when a case is brought to us, we'll do a contextual analysis to figure out, number one, if that child is even alive. Number two, if that child is alive, we'll send an advanced team or recon team out to check out the AO, the area of operation, to know exactly what we're up against. Most of our cases, or the last 6 years, have been involved with MS-13, Bloods and Crips, some pretty hardcore perpetrators, the cartel, and into a lot of areas that should actually, things that have come across the border and have institutionalized themselves in this trafficking model, because as many of us know, it's pretty much a perfect business model. And a lot of those entities are getting out of the drug trade and are getting into the trafficking of children. And so once we do that, then the third thing we do is we check to see if we have a budget for it. Do we go to our donors? For us, no one receives a paycheck. This is all volunteer. So it's not piecemeal, but what we do is we go and figure out what that budget's going to cost. and then we launch an operation, and we will coordinate with local, state, and federal law enforcement. We will pull the whole intel report and put it in their hands if we have to, with DOJ. And most of the time, what we found out over at least the course of many years is most of those law enforcement entities will come alongside of us as a strategic partner, and they'll ask us to run the operation. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we have a lot of tier one operators. We have a lot of former FBI, former CIA, former military, former everything that have some really good downrange time. And one of the keys to this, and it's an OPSEC key, operational security, is we actually end up vetting every participant and every organization that's going to come alongside of us. That includes law enforcement. Now, sadly, I think, and it's fair to admit this, we, over the course of the last 15 years, sadly, a lot of our law enforcement partners have found themselves with a lot of corruption within the ranks. Just yesterday, I got a report on my desk about another police officer that has molested another child. And this has got to stop. It doesn't mean the whole unit or the whole division or the whole police task force is that way, but that type of corruption in the ranks exists everywhere. It exists in politics, in churches, in medical communities, whatever. So what we do is some very extensive vetting. We go behind the veil to find out things like who's looking at child porn, who's looking at pornography, who's purchasing people for trafficking, and the list goes on and on. And once we know we have a clean house, then we'll go ahead and engage with those partners. And what we do is we look for windows of opportunity. Only if we're in Syria, where we're up against ISIS or somebody like that, will we carry weapons. Here in the United States, we don't carry any weapons with us. We look for windows of opportunity, and we use the same tradecraft that I use in the agency to actually get that child out of the situation. We don't even arrest the perpetrators. We'll take that information, that intel, and turn that over to law enforcement and let them go in and rescue the perpetrators. Once we get a clean break, we'll take that child through a special program, that we have, where we have transportation, secure transportation, that'll take them to a safe house. 24 hours to 48 hours, they get scrubbed, meaning all their technical tracking elements are removed. And in that time, we're coordinating with restoration centers. And then within the 24 hours of the 48-hour period, we'll take them to the restorative care entity so they can go ahead and complete their journey. And the reason we do that, not only because of operational security, is because the perpetrators now are getting so sophisticated. We found out that they're actually tracking victims or survivors once they've been rescued straight to the restorative care facilities, and they're managing to either get them out or convince the victim to leave. And so now your whole operation was really worth nothing. And I think what we're going to see in the future, and this is just, and I'll jump off of here real quick, but anyone who's listening, what you're going to see is the escalation of violence, because as they continue to get more sophisticated, and we know this with MS-13 because we've personally experienced this, they're going to start going to the restorative care centers, and they're actually going to kick the door in. They're going to kill the staff, and they're not going to go after the one bit of commodity that you took there. They're going to go ahead and get the other 7 girls there, and they're going to create an instant stable, and they're going to take them out of there. And for people that don't believe that will happen, within the next couple of years, come back to me when you all of a sudden see it start happening and go, wait a minute, I don't know who these guys were, but they came in and they just took over. So that's kind of, I know I didn't get into any real nitty gritty, and mainly because there's a security element to all the other things we do, and we just really can't go there because we don't know really who's listening out of the 97 participants here. And what we found over the course of time is most of the time when you have a forum like this, if you haven't been able to vet everybody, trust me, MS-13, Bloods, Crips, perpetrators, they're all in there listening going, okay, what are these people up to these days? So thank you, Tom.
Yeah, of course. And I appreciate you addressing kind of the legislative and technical side and carrying weapons or not. I think that there's a lot of portrayals of this kind of thing on TV and in the movies, where it's kind of this dirty dozen mission of grizzled old mercenaries with ratty equipment kicking down doors and making off with rescued slaves and stuff. And I'm sure that it's a lot more nuanced than that. Bruce, I'd like to hear your take. I know you also do some similar work.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been traveling the world for about 40 years, and during those 40 years, I've just made lots of relationships in 30 plus countries. And those relationships become the beginning of our information network of how to identify where to find these children around the United States here too. And so our method of operation really is to use these people in other countries who have a passion for this to find these children. They find safe houses for us, families that will end up with the rescued children. And then our teams will go over and make the rounds and go into these tea shops or cafes or hotels or, brick fields, wherever it is, and extract these children and hopefully be able to prosecute the perpetrators. Last year, I think we rescued 180 children. The average age out of brothels was 8 and 9 years old. The youngest was 3, with men lined up, ready to go into the room. And then once we get them out, we call our survivor care program, similar to what Teresa was talking about, and get them into safe places and get counseling for them. And so without giving a lot of information out, I guess that's kind of the basis for it. But we train our own teams. We, like what Baz was talking about, we have tier 1 operators and ex-government people, and all the way down to somebody that was working in a coffee shop that wanted to get involved. And so we have a lot of different levels of involvement, whether it's a rescue team operator or survivor care team or investigators. I had 2 gentlemen sitting on both sides of me right here that flew in for a meeting tomorrow. And they were overseas earlier this year before this COVID thing hit. They went into a country to do an advanced investigative thing, came back and said there was tens of thousands of children that disappeared through employment centers, never to be seen again. And so we have these teams that go out and they do all the advanced work and come back and give a detailed report of whether we think we can work in that country or not. So that's kind of the baseline of what we do.
Great. Yousef, do you have anything you want to chime in with here?
Yeah, specifically what me and the team do over here, Tom, is I build safe instructors. So I tried to copy myself to teach the specific behavioral domains. So I built the safe instructor program to certify these people in the specific indicators, fear, threat, discomfort, and start establishing baselines and looking for anomalies. It doesn't have to be specific towards one specific criminal act or violent or terrorist act. When your brain has fear or threat, a lot of these behaviors come out. So I can't tell you what's going on in the person's head, but I can pick them out of a crowd. What my safe instructors are doing are hitting the private sector. Anybody who has frontline staff, nursing, realtors, anybody who has contact with the public, who isn't privy to all this fantastic gold you guys are giving us today, doesn't know the scheme of maneuver and all that. I can come in, or a safe instructor can come in going, hey, if you see A, B, C, or D, maybe you should tap somebody on the shoulder. It gives them kind of a decision tree, all right? So for example, I was teaching a couple years ago at a bank, and a woman, she came up to me on a break. She was kind of teary-eyed, and I do a section on denial. And I'm sure everybody listening, my biggest fight every day is denial. When people see these observations, they go, wow, that looks funny. But what do they defer to? They go, oh, they're probably just doing A, B, C. They fill it in. So I fight denial with all these observable indicators. So this woman walks up to me. She goes, I was born and raised in Guatemala, a really, really bad part of Guatemala. Not like, oh, we were poor, like, less than poor. And she saw people killed right in front of her, at an early age. And she said after the training, after she got the instruction, she'd been walking around her whole life looking over her back, checking her 6. And she was very self-conscious of that. On this break, she grabbed me. She goes, my kids used to make fun of me because of this, but she goes, I feel like you gave me permission. My permission for what? She goes, I feel like you gave me permission to make a decision, to not deny it, to not walk it away, because she's been thinking she was the one that's messed up all this time. So that's my message there, is get those safe instructors out there teaching hotel and hotel staff. They don't have to have, law enforcement degrees, but if I can give them a laminated list and go, hey, if you see these behaviors and they're with it out of the baseline, then we're that much more ahead of the game.
I'm really glad that you touched on some of that stuff. We're getting a lot of questions from the audience. They're kind of overlapping, and if you're sending questions in, keep them coming. I'm checking them as we go. I'm seeing a lot of questions, about how to spot potential signs, and I'm gonna try and dedicate a chunk to that here in a minute. So I'm sure we'll be able to talk more about that. Teresa, I'd like to hear from you and to the original question of what do your operations look like. I know, as a victim yourself, I'm sure that you are still doing a lot of outreach and advocacy type operations, and I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, thanks. And it was interesting because somebody posted a question on here about, well, we need to concentrate more on prevention so we don't have to do rescue. That's in an ideal world. We all here would love to have this, be put out of this business. We don't want to do it. Prevention is really hard to get into the schools, to be able to talk to kids about this stuff. As long as men are buying children, then this isn't going to go away. So in my belief, we have strong laws against it around the country, but they need to be enacted. And that comes down from the arresting officer to the judge that's overseeing are they getting 2 years for raping a child? Or, or are they getting, life, like Baz said? So we need to do an overhaul in this whole area. For our operations, we partner with local churches, schools, whoever wants to do this, and we find a location and we get together volunteers and say, who wants to come and help us do this soap outreach? And we get donations from people that buy the soaps and the materials, the cards that we give every single hotel and motel. We train all of our volunteers. It's not just they're sitting there putting a label on a bar of soap and we're like, okay, go to these hotels. They get an extensive training because I want them to be able to have a 5-minute conversation with the security guard at the hotel, with the housekeeping staff, with the front desk staff, and we go to every single hotel and motel in an area, and it doesn't matter if it's a high-end hotel or pay by the hour. We have volunteers that will go to every single location, boots on the ground, swamping the area with missing children's posters. And then they have a number. A lot of the hotel people will say, we've called law enforcement. They don't want to come. They don't want to do this. They're not bothered with it. They didn't know where to call. Maybe they didn't want lights and sirens at their hotel. So we give them other options of places that they can call if they see that kid. And we talk to them like, I'm sure you have a daughter or a sister, and wouldn't you want, if they were stuck in this situation, to be able to get out? And they're not there because they don't want to be there. Nobody wants to have sex with 20 men every single night of the week, and we put it in those terms. And they think of this as prostitution, that she wants to be there and doing this. So we take that 5 minutes or whatever they can give us, and we try to reframe their mindset there. And then we also say, hey, if you'd like more information on this, we can hook you up with somebody locally to come and train your staff, because this is happening in hotels and motels. This is the #1 place it's happening at. So can you help us? And we leave them with a lot of, mouse pads for the front desk that have the phone number on it, the red flags, soaps for every single hotel room. And then our volunteers are finished, and we just wait for them, then the phone calls to come in so that the local law enforcement can take over. And then we have a whole survivor part of it as well, once they are getting healing, and that we can help them. But that's our rescue operations.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting a handful of questions here. Again, everybody is really into wanting to wanting to put a stop to this, wanting to know how it functions. Baz, I'm going to start with you. Somebody actually specifically referenced the interview that we did with you for the print article that's in our current issue of OFFGRID. You had mentioned Super Bowls and large sporting events being, hotbeds for this kind of activity. And Teresa, I know you just talked about hotels, motels also being kind of a prime spot. So we have some people asking, are there legacy or traditional or consistent hotspots, whether we're talking about regionally in the country or in terms of physical locations that may be nationwide, right? A type of location, hotels, motels, or sporting events. Are there reliable and consistent hotbeds for trafficking activity? And if so, if I get my tickets to the Super Bowl, how do I potentially spot that? But before I get into the how to spot, let's talk about, are there kind of hubs and gathering points and traditional, like I said, hotspots or hotbeds where this occurs? So Baz, you got referenced, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, there are. Look, first of all, any major city, that's always a hot spot. It's hot. It's great to hide. I mean, it's easy to hide in plain sight. Anytime you have any entertainment event, I don't care what it is, from Hollywood to the Super Bowl to Comic-Con or whatever it is, those you're going to always find trafficking in those areas. In addition to that, larger entertainment areas, Las Vegas, those areas constantly. And the easiest way for me to tell the audience or to answer that question is simply this: people have become a commodity, okay? So if you can sell anything, I don't care what it is, popcorn, you can find out what your audience wants, and you can give them that commodity, they're going to purchase it, okay? So just think of this. Think of all the people that engage in pornography across the board in the United States. And when they go to an entertainment event, NFL, and they don't want their wives to know, or they don't want their husbands to know, or they go on a business trip or whatever, the commodity they're seeking is someone that's being prostituted, okay? So instead of saying, yes, it happens at every Super Bowl, or yes, it happens at every time there's a Barnum and Bailey circus or whatever that, just think entertainment. Where is it happening? Where there's a convention center? Where is there going to be a large gathering of people? Because the perpetrators, they're businessmen and they're businesswomen, and they have a commodity, and they say, where can we sell? Where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? Okay. And so we know this because we send advanced teams into these places to assist law enforcement to spot this trafficking that's going on, and it's happening. You go to Las Vegas. There's not only the casinos, and I'm not picking on Vegas. It's just that they have a trafficking problem there. And look at all the hotels. And in addition to that, because if we look at the COVID incident right now, and which is interesting, we're starting to see more trafficking online than we have ever seen before. A lot of parents lock their door to keep their kids safe in their house, but they don't go to find out what their kids are watching or looking at on the computer. And so they open up another door, and the perpetrators come right through the computer. And it may start with something like, hey, if you take your shirt off, I'll give you $200 through PayPal. Okay, so a kid does that, and that kid's 10 years old. The next thing you know is like, hey, if you take all your clothes off, I'll give you $500. And then it goes from that. And the parents don't even know what's going on, but it's happening right in their own house. Next thing you know, it's like, I'll give you $1,000 if you meet me at Starbucks so we can talk about a job opportunity. And that kid goes, and you never see that kid again. And we find that kid's being prostituted on the streets of one of these great places. So, and in addition to these quote unquote, if we're going to call them hot spots, I think it's fair to ask this simple question: is how are they transported to all these hot spots? Okay. You don't see, this past year, 2019, I think we had 421,000 children missing in the United States. You don't see 421,000 children walking on the streets. So they all have to get to Vegas. They all have to get to Oklahoma City. They all have to get to the Super Bowl. They all have to get that. And so they're being transported, and they're being transported in a very sophisticated way. And actually, Teresa can speak better to this a little bit later, but let me just ask this question to our audience. Even, and excuse my French, but it kind of infuriates me. Even if you're listening and you don't give a rat's ass about children being trafficked across the United States, let me ask you this. Is there a national security issue here? And if there's anybody that's a politician on here, or a congressman, or a senator in the military, let me ask you this. Is there a national security issue here? If I can transport children across the United States to every NFL game undetected, what else can be transported undetected? Nuclear weapons, terrorists, drugs? Yes, we have a national security issue here. The reason I bring that up is because people like Bruce and Yousef and Teresa and all of us have been up there, and we've been before congressmen. We've spoken this issue over and over and over, and it just kind of falls on deaf ears sometimes. And even when we speak it to Americans and some people who are listening on here right now, it just kind of falls on deaf ears because people go, well, what can I do? It's not a really big issue. I'm not really sure. Guess what? You need to be concerned. The first time you get a dirty bomb that goes off in your city, you're going to wish you had done something about the logistical aspects of human trafficking in the United States.
Teresa, I'm going to go to you. You know, hotels, motels, and I'm sure that you have some more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, those are obviously the biggest ones. You know, when we're looking at these busts that are happening, it's, you know, always hotels and motels. We're not seeing so much of what we thought of before as street walkers. Like Baz said, the kids aren't just walking around the streets. It's definitely hidden in plain sight. We had a report at the Super Bowl in Phoenix that we did of a driver, a young guy with out-of-state plates, pulling up to a hotel, and 4 young teenagers dropped off, and then he left. I mean, like, think about it. Like, what else could this be? You know, they were not the same race. And so that was definitely a big red flag. We train our teams to look for those signs. We've had a much older man, different race than the young girl, all made up, walking into a motel on a Saturday at 1. Again, that's, you know, what else can this be? So when Craigslist was up and running, not Craigslist, Backpage, we used it for our advantage too, because we could, you know, every night at midnight, 11:59, I was on there counting how many girls were being advertised for sex for sale, say in Detroit. And then I could compare that, you know, to 2 weeks later when a big event's coming into town. And it quadrupled anytime an event was coming into town. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Even the Columbus Marathon, it quadrupled. So now that Backpage is down, of course, other ones have popped up. So a lot of websites they're being advertised on. That's the #1 way that you're going to see it as well. But, you know, it is happening in every community. I was trafficked in a very high-end suburb outside of Detroit. So it's not just the inner cities. You know, it can be just between, I was taken from house to house, very, very nice houses where they had, you know, contracted with my traffickers. So, you know, it can range anywhere from motorcycle gangs that are passing her around and charging to the high-end area as well. So like the Epstein cases where people are knowing what's going on, but nobody's talking.
I also saw you responding to some of the chats with some, I assume, are statistical kind of hotbeds. Thank you for that, by the way. You know, I appreciate you taking in direct engagement there. Bruce, do you have anything to add?
No, I think they covered it well. I think this is an area they know better than I do, especially here in the States. I believe that there is different types of networks, though, and I believe that beyond things like the Arnold Classic and the Super Bowl, which are big events that have trafficking, that there are the mom and pop operations and the guy living in the country that's got a girl in his basement. I think there's a lot of different levels to this, but I think that they answered that far better than I could have.
Yeah, can I say something to that? That was a great point. Probably 45% of the survivors that we work with have been trafficked by family members. The official statistic out right now is about 35%, but what we're seeing is it's much higher than that, of the father, the stepfather, the grandparents. I was in a tiny little town in Michigan, and a 14-year-old came up to me and said that her mom used to sell her to the landlord to pay the rent. Now that's human trafficking, you know, regardless if it's for drugs or whatever they're using that money for. Luckily the guy was prosecuted, but I don't know that anything happened to the mom. And these stories I hear all the time, and we cannot forget to look that families many times are behind this.
So I've gotten a couple of audience questions wanting to address a big giant elephant in the room, and that's everything going on with the Jeff Epstein case and a lot of the fallout that's come from that. And I think it was even mentioned earlier as one of the events that has sort of precipitated a kind of new wave of attention and hopefully engagement on this issue. So I'll try and drill it down a little bit and say, would you guys characterize what happened or what we know publicly about his case? Would you say that that's pretty typical of the kind of situations you encounter? And what can we learn from it in general? Yousef, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, it's a lot to unpack, Tom. You know, psychologically, what are those people thinking around the predator? What is the predator thinking around those people doing openly? But, you know, I think it's more of, and I'm going to mess up the name, but basically the bystander effect. You walk around in New York City, you see 3 people beating a person in the alley, and you got 40 people standing there watching it happen or videotaping. You know, that's become the default decision. Not, hey, should I help this person? Should I maybe call somebody? Let me get my phone out and videotape. So I think when you have that group, and, you know, especially someone with Epstein with a lot of resources and power and whatnot, I can't tell you, people just kind of glaze over and go with it. I mean, think about it. You're handing them the goose that lays the golden egg. You know, what will people justify to live that kind of life, to have the things that they want? The human being will justify a lot of stuff.
Bruce?
Yeah, can you tell me the question again?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I get it. It's like Yousef said, it's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, the Epstein case,
Epstein.
right? Is it typical of what you've encountered kind of in the trenches, and what can we as a greater audience kind of learn? What does it tell us about the norms and the trade and everything like that?
Well, I think there's a lot of Epsteins out there. I think that this is a lot more common than we probably know around the world. I think there's probably very similar situations going on all over the place, similar to Epstein. I've encountered it overseas, where we have found that a specific wealthy person in a country has been suspected of doing exactly what Epstein was accused of and what he did. I don't think it's probably the biggest percent of what I think religious-based slavery and organized crime are probably the biggest percent. At least that's in my opinion. There's so many different factors to that. I'm not sure that I can easily define that, but I would say that from Epstein's down to a single person, there's a big wide range of what really defines human traffickers.
Teresa?
Yeah, I think that from a first survivor perspective, that somebody always knows something's going on. I mean, there's got to be. My neighbor would see me at midnight running through his backyard in my pajamas to go meet the car because they were picking me up to go traffic me. He would see me while he was watching TV, and yet he never said anything to my parents. I mean, you know, did he maybe think something else was going on? I don't know, but I'm in my pajamas. I mean, at least say something. So we know that there's always some bystander, and we see that with the Epstein case, where we have the groomer, the recruiter, which was, is it Giselle or what, the female, who was earning their trust, and she was providing him the girls. He was at his island, and you know, different celebrities and dignitaries are there. I've heard rumors that he would have sex up to 10 times a day. You can't tell me that nobody knew what was going on. I mean, somebody knew something was unusual. So I think that's the biggest part, is that this is going on, whether it be a family member that's doing it, a neighbor, but that there's got to be some bystanders that are seeing it. And I think just a lot of people don't know what to do. You know, we see that with hotels and motel owners. They're like, we know this is happening, but we just didn't know what to do. And, you know, calling 911, calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, calling the missing kids number, you know, just doing something as a start. And that's kind of like our message a lot of times, is if you see something, say something. You might be wrong, but what if you're right? You just saved someone's life.
Bazzel?
You know, 17 years ago, we were digging into the Epstein thing, and we were bringing it to the attention of certain people, and they just blew it off. I think a lot of that is, Teresa, you're right. People didn't know what to do with it. There were other people that knew how powerful, what circles he floated in. I agree with Bruce and Yousef, and particularly what Bruce said. I think there are many Epsteins out there. I think that it's important to understand or find out or uncover who they are. But what's more important, and I think what's frustrating for the American public, is the accountability issue. It's like, you know, we didn't get that with Epstein. Whether he killed himself or whether someone killed him, we don't know. And I think we're all standing by now to see, is there going to be accountability? Is justice going to be served? And the question that I think that I would ask all the audience is simply this, is that if for whatever reason justice isn't served, what are you willing to do to hold people accountable for the lack of justice? I think what happens is, for some reason, some odd reason, whether they're all running in the same circle or we're afraid or whatever it is, we don't make governors step down. We don't force lawmakers to quit their jobs. We don't hold judges accountable when someone rapes a kid and they get 30 days for it or stuff like this. And I think that if we, for whatever reason, if we're blessed for accountability to take its proper place on the Epstein case, no matter who's running it, whether it's Attorney General Barr or President Trump and Pence or whatever, and we see people go to jail for what was done to those victims, I think we might, for the first time in a long time, get a foothold on those type of perpetrators, to be honest with you.
Thank you much, all of you, for that. I appreciate it. Obviously, it's something a lot of people have been trying to, Yousef, as you said, have been trying to unpack. I'm going to switch gears one last time here. We're starting to run the clock out. But again, we've gotten a lot of questions from people wanting to know, you know, what can they do, right? How do I spot that this may be happening in my town, or like Teresa, in your case, you know, my neighbors, my family members. Yousef, I'm going to start with you. I kind of feel like this is right up your alley. What do I look for? And if I think I see it, what do I do about it?
Yeah. So, you know, we'll start at the behavior. There are two components here. There's the upper level, you know, kind of organizational stuff, and the specific behaviors that we talk about. So if someone's showing me discomfort, this is going to be kind of hard to swallow, but I basically put myself in the feet of the trafficker. I go, here I am with, you know, a group of women. I'm in a location. How am I going to pull this off? How am I going to pull this off and not get caught by law enforcement? That's a tough pill to swallow, and that's a really hard kind of mental exercise to do. But if you can do it, you can start learning things about it that you wouldn't even realize when you unpack. If you keep seeing me looking over here, John called me, you know, a little bit before we got on here, and I go, all right, let me get some content together. And I started with the children right in the middle, and I started coming off each end of it and breaking things down like hygiene. Okay, you have 10, 15, 20 women, small kids, hygiene products. What are we going to do with that? Medical, how are they getting medically treated? Is ER, urgent care room, advertising, how's this going about advertising? My whole point of all the stuff I'm saying is this is absolutely an enterprise. It's a $150 billion a year enterprise. I saw, this wasn't children, but I saw statistics that said about $200,000 per traffickee is what they can make per person. So absolutely, it's business enterprise. So in my head, I like to attack the enterprise. You know, in the military, we attack the network. So I want to attack the enterprise and deny them the ability to move freely. You know, what Boz was talking about, he got me all fired up. Like they can do these things with impunity because it's kind of covered and no one wants to talk about it. So educating the public on specific pre-event indicators, you know, if you work at a hotel and, you know, you ask someone a question like, hey, can I have your passport? And they don't have control of the document. Someone else has a document, or you're not conversing with them. So it's little things like that, that the average everyday citizen who's not involved in law enforcement or legislation, all you got to know is a couple different indicators and go, wait a minute, some crazy Arab guy told me something one time. I need to do something. I need to talk to somebody. I need to call someone. But to wrap it with an analogy, and I don't want to go too much in this because everyone has said OPSEC, but there was a great story, and this goes back to 9/11, where one of the guys who helped pull 9/11 off, we basically churned him. He was like a triple agent, and he started advising for us in Afghanistan. All right, trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. And he's an Arab guy, he's an Egyptian guy. He gets on the ground. We're dealing with, you know, a culture on the ground there. And there was a lot of Arab fighters coming in from another area. Those are obviously very high targets because they're, you know, high profile targets. We want to know where the Arab fighters are coming in this area. So what he did, he's got on the ground. He goes, I'll tell you how to find them right now. And everyone said, oh, they're ghosts. We can't find them. And he gets on the ground. He goes, take me to the market. And he goes, you go find me the guy with the Arab spices. He goes, Afghanis don't eat this spice. Arabs eat this spice. Go and find me that guy. And they sat there and, you know, long story short, we know what happened there. Not to go too in the weeds with it. That's what I'm talking about, is attack the enterprise, deny them the area, and don't give them the ability to logistically push this up in any manner. Transportation, medical, hygiene, whatever it is.
So I'm going to shift from the analytical to the personal. Teresa, I'm sure you have a lot of great insight from the inside looking out, the things that you either think people saw or you found out later people did see, and at what junctions were those opportunities missed?
Great question. Just everything from a teacher, you know, at school where they saw, because some of my traffickers actually went to school with me and were older. It was a part of a much larger mafia organized crime ring in Detroit. And so some of them were in the school, and so they were watching me constantly. So the teachers, I believe, were probably also afraid of this group. You know, I was sick a lot. I didn't want to go to school a lot. So the school nurse never called me in to talk to me about what's going on. Grades dropped. Counselor never talked to me about, you know, is there anything going on at home? To, like I said, the neighbor. And then other than that, like, I was taken to these people's homes. So the basements were usually the area where I was taken to, these almost like a lair where all men were at and conducting their business. But the families were upstairs the entire time, the grandmas, the moms, the children. And so, you know, they would see these guys pull up in a car at midnight with, you know, somebody that's, you know, not of the same ethnicity, young girl, you know, me, and then taking me inside and then taking me out again at 3. Like, that's very suspicious. So I did not have a lot of contact with law enforcement, only one time when I was taken to a motel. So it can look a lot of ways, but we definitely are missing it. There's definitely red flags out there of these kids. I know of several young kids that were working at strip clubs, you know, 14 years old. That's absolutely ridiculous that they're being trafficked. How come nobody is saying anything about that when they see, you can't tell me that even if she's really made up that she looks, over 21. There's no way. So, but questioning those things, when something doesn't feel right, God gave us this little instinct in our belly, and it's almost always right, and even if it's wrong, it's okay. I mean, call somebody. So people ask me all the time, like, I saw this thing, what do you think? I'm like, well, if you think that it was, questionable, maybe just saying to her, like, hey, can I help you? Like slipping her a phone number. I mean, you have to get creative on how you approach a victim. That can be a little difficult, especially if the trafficker is around. But there are ways to do that.
It's funny you talk about gut feelings and little tingles. Something that I got taught in a class I took one time about those feelings, those gut feelings. Yousef, you said that the human mind can rationalize a lot. What I got told was it might not be something, but it's not nothing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a super cool nugget that I've taken with me into a lot of situations. And sometimes those situations turned out to be completely benign, but I think the normalcy bias and all that, there's a want to, I'm sure it's not as bad as it looks, or I'm sure it's not as bad as my mind is just running away and my imagination's getting carried off and things like that.
Yeah,
but again,
I wish somebody would have said something. I wish somebody would have said, hey, are you okay? Or, acted on that instinct. It would have saved me a lot. And I can tell you, every survivor wishes that somebody would say something, because we don't have our voice. They have taken our voice away, that we're terrified beyond. There's no word in the English dictionary that explains to you that fear that they install in us. And we're not going to say anything. People always say, like, well, why didn't you just say anything? Why didn't you just, call the police? It's not that easy. That doesn't work.
Bazzel, I certainly don't want to leave you out of this. I'm sure you've got plenty of notes, and we've given you a lot of fodder to run with. So take it away.
I get that question asked to me constantly. People come up, they know what we do. They go, what can I do? We live in an instantaneous gratification society. Everybody's looking to take one pill and go, oh my gosh, that's the answer. So here's how I would respond to that. Your capabilities, your weaknesses and your strengths more than anybody else. What you can afford to do, what you have time to do, and what you cannot do. My recommendation is you go and get yourself trained. You learn the area of operation. You learn what you're dealing with, not what you think you know, but what you need to know, whether that's Teresa's course or whether it's our 5-day course or whether Bruce has a course or Yousef has a course, where you can be trained at a level of intensity, which is, quite honestly, is not easy. Look, our course is 5 days, 12 hours a day. It's intense because we're equipping people. But go and get yourself trained first. Then sit back after a couple of days and go, okay, how do I fit in here? Where do I fit in? For me to sit here and go, well, you could do this and you can do this and you can do this. I might be giving you the wrong guidance. You might get out there and fall on your sword. Look, I'm not going to tell somebody that doesn't have tier 1 operator experience, look, you can go run surveillance. My first question would be, have you ever done an SDR? Do you know how to do counter surveillance? What's your trade craft? How about COVCOM? Do you understand that people are listening to your transmissions between you and your team? I mean, it involves a lot of stuff. And for me to try to tell you where you fit in and what you can do would be a great injustice. So that's my advice to you. Get involved, learn the AO, the area of operation, and then you sit and figure out with good counsel where you can fit in and what you can do in your city and your town, your location, because guess what? They're all different. They're all different. Operating in a big city is not like operating in a town of 1,500 people. Operating like Bruce does overseas or Yousef is not like me operating sometimes in Compton, Los Angeles area, or wherever it may be. Those AOs are all different. And if you really are serious about saving lives, then you'll be serious about taking some training to learn where you fit in.
I am actually very, very, very glad you said that. We are just about out of time. But you brought up training, and again, one of the things that keeps coming up on my question thread here is people want to know how they can get involved. People want to know, or I'm seeing people identifying as LEOs chime in saying, hey, I want to do more, in this particular area. So what we're going to do for everybody in the audience is this entire broadcast is going to be posted up on our website, uncut, unabridged, in hopefully the next couple of days. When we do make that web post, we are going to have web links to every single panelist's organization, website, social media, things like that. So all of the training and all of the volunteer opportunities that we've touched on here, we're gonna, if that's a step that you want to take, we're gonna provide all that information for you with the click, literally at the click of a button. So that about wraps it up for us. Thank you all for hanging out and for taking the time out of your weekday to sit and really give some thought and some reflection on a topic that, as we've said, is a little bit ugly, and that a lot of people would just kind of probably rather pretend doesn't exist. So thank you all for that. That's it for us. And keep your eye out on the website for this broadcast in its entirety, with supporting web links to where you can go to get training and to help.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Down out there.